So I'm going to talk a bit about kind of process and how I make my work and how I collaborate with people and artists, architects, designers, musicians, and most of all, fabricators. I love making. I love the hands-on approach. So a lot of my research is actually practical research, working with materials and learning how I can kind of push certain materials, how I can understand materials, how I can kind of connect forms as well. So for me, the hands-on approach was much more appealing than kind of reading books and doing research that way. So I didn't really start working with fabricators until kind of much later on, because the other thing that I find really difficult is letting go. Letting go of kind of production side of the work, letting go of the work when it's finished. You know, there's a lot of things that kind of come with it. But this is an example of kind of me trying to understand, I guess, kind of the three-dimensional aspect of my work, and also really wanting to scale up, and not being able to, obviously, as a student, you know, you don't immediately get projects to work at that scale. So model making was the best way to kind of approach it. And you know, and I mean, fortunately, I was really lucky after I graduated from my master's to work for Will Alsop for a couple of years, model making, and that's been a huge kind of learning curve for me, and at the same time, tool to kind of a way to kind of explore my work in terms of scale. And anyway, so going back to the work, here's an example of a piece that I made during my BA actually, and I had to have this kind of laser cut. So I started working with people quite early on, and you know, communication is so important that I found, and I'm not very good at that. This is a skill that I really had to work pretty hard at, and you know, I have a very short temper, I'm impatient, and all of those things can kind of really go against in terms of working with people. And it's not that you don't have respect for, you know, people's kind of profession, but I think, you know, when you're a certain way, it can really kind of stop you from collaborating. So my learning curve started quite early. And this is a series of work where I was exploring colour and trying to understand colour. And, you know, this is where I've started kind of combining materials, and I had no idea about, didn't really know where to go to understand how I can kind of stop these materials from kind of peeling off. So I was doing a lot of research in the studio on my own, and it was kind of, I think, this is me in the studio kind of working with resin. I was having a nightmare with resin, trying to find a resin that didn't peel off the tape from the surface. And I just didn't have the funding at that stage to really work with skilled, knowledgeable people. So it was, I mean, in a way, I'm grateful that I had that period, because it meant that I built up a kind of knowledge in a different way, you know, trying to be a bit more patient with myself and trying to kind of have different approaches and not really giving up. So this is one of the work where I guess really made me connect with the fabricator. So this is, I think by this stage I'd really physically hurt my back and couldn't make larger scaled works, couldn't make heavy work, so I had to find a way to make large scale pieces but in kind of multiple, if that makes sense. And so this is a piece of work that's kind of powder coated, so I wanted to find a way to apply colour to a material that I just couldn't apply colour to in the studio. I didn't, every method I tried wasn't working. I couldn't achieve the finish I wanted. And so the first, I guess, proper kind of fabricator I was using was powder coaters. And they were fortunately very close by, which meant that I could build a relationship with them. And I think I've known them for now kind of about 15 years. They closed down about 3 years ago and have now reopened, and I was like, I don't care how far away you are, I want to work with you, and the reason is because there's a trust that's kind of built up over the years. There's an understanding, and that is so important for an artist like me, who I don't like to see myself as controlling. But I think in this occasion, I think it's, it is important to say, as artists, we are quite kind of, we want things to be a certain way, and you have to have a certain amount of control, and you have to be able to, achieve that through kind of collaboration. And so this was kind of the beginning of it. And it's led me to kind of continue working with them, and so they now do a lot of work for me, and we don't actually need to have that many conversations. I can just send a simple note and the work will go off and it'll come back exactly the way I want it and the quality that I want it. So quality is so important. I do tend to send it back. And I have sent things back quite a lot if I'm unhappy with it. And it can cause a rift. When the powder coaters closed for a year, I had to start working with a new guy who, again, he has his own kind of ways of working. And he's not that used to working with artists and demanding artists, I've been told. And I just found it so difficult and frustrating because, I built up a relationship with Armatech, who just understood exactly the kind of surface I, require in order to work in the studio. So this is an example of a piece of work that's been powder coated, and we then apply the second and the third layer of colours in the studio. This is a piece of work where I, it's quite funny because again, it was about the fact that I couldn't make larger works, and I was thinking about my back. And in fact, this work is really, really heavy. I ended up working with a company that sprays cars, and I looked quite hard to find someone. And most of the car body spray places, they just are not willing to work with artists, and mainly because there isn't enough money in it, but also they just are not willing to deal with artists. And this is a guy that had a massive garage, and I had to kind of literally beg him to kind of, try this out. Unfortunately, I don't work with them anymore because it was really difficult to kind of stay on top of the quality. But it's a good example of kind of, another kind of collaboration as well. This is a series of work that I initially started off making in paper. And they were kind of studies for form, to understand form. And the more I worked with this kind of material, I thought, actually, this is a really interesting way of also exploring colour. And I just, and as I was working with colour, I realised that actually this has a potential to kind of go large. And obviously it's dependent on projects that come up, it's dependent on budgets that I have. And I do tend to spend quite a lot of money that I make from sales of work, kind of investing it back in the studio, in the team that I have, in the materials that I work with, in the process that, I use. And so this is kind of made with stainless, actually this is actually mild steel. I've now kind of progressed into kind of stainless steel, but mild steel was a lot cheaper, and I could try out ideas then. But this was interesting, working on this series of work, because I had to work with few different people. And so it meant kind of managing my time, managing the kind of the logistics as well. And so, I would make a paper piece and then do a drawing from it and then send it to someone who would then fold it for me, and then it would come back to me. I would then apply the bracket on the back, and then it would go off to the painter. And then it would come back and get documented and created. So there's a lot of kind of process involved, and it's been really interesting kind of, again, trying to build relationship with new kind of fabricators. And it's been really, I mean, I've learnt a lot about myself, and I think what I've also appreciated that, working with other people and seeing, how they kind of work and communicate and manage projects has been a fantastic way for me to kind of manage my own I guess temper and how I can be, it's just, it doesn't work, shouting doesn't work anymore. So I realised, what is the best way to kind of achieve the quality that I want. And so this is another example of this series of work. And so this is, like Jane was saying, I like to kind of blur the boundaries between painting, sculpture, design and architecture. I love collaborating. I love new challenges. And I was approached one year to design a piece of furniture for an Italian furniture company. I cannot remember. Anyway, I made this quick model in paper and submitted it, and they turned around and said no. I didn't pursue it. I just thought, well, it's their loss. If they don't want to do it, then I don't care. There'll be an opportunity that comes up. An opportunity did come up, and I wanted to produce it for a solo show in London, and we started making it in-house. So I have a small team, and it's kind of, the team is made up of an engineer and designers and artists, and it's a great kind of environment, and I'm very, very fortunate to be in a position where I can kind of absorb all their kind of knowledge. Anyway, we made one in the studio and realised actually it's not very efficient. We don't have all the tools to continue producing them in the studio, so we wanted to kind of have it, outsource it, if you like. And I thought, well, I need someone who can do the kind of the technical drawing. So I contacted my structural engineer, and he immediately said, it's not possible to make, Rana. It's if you look at the geometry, it's not. And I was like, if you look at the photographs, you can see I've actually made it, And so the problem he had was that that image in the corner here, you could see where the triangle kind of twists around, and so it flips onto the other side. And he said it's not possible with the material that I was making. And I don't like to hear no. No is one of the things that I just hate at home and in the studio. So, my kids do not like it. And if I use it by accident, I get told off. And so he was like, no, it's not possible. And I said, look, Peter, look at the photograph. We've actually made it. And I really need you to do the drawing, because I don't have the skills to do a computer drawing. And I really don't want to deal with the questions of, the fabricator's going to come back to me. So I'd rather have all the answers in one package before I send it. So this is another way that I like to work, is that I don't like lots of emails back and forth. I can kind of guess, some of the questions that are going to come up when I'm working with fabricators. So I usually like to provide all the information. And, I also know that they're working on lots of different projects, and it just makes sense for me to kind of provide a package that has all the answers that they need. Anyway, he finally, realised, and as a way of apologising, he made a printed model of it, kind of saying, here's your drawing and here's your model. So we had to get a fabricator to produce these furnitures. This is another project that I did, I think it's in 2017. And it started from these paintings, and I wanted to find a way to kind of translate it into the sculptural way and make it more interactive. And so I worked with fabricators called White Wall, and they were just absolutely amazing, from beginning to end. And dealing with everything, kind of producing it, samples, doing the test, to shipping it, installing it out there. And I just realised it was absolute heaven. And I thought, this is how I want to work on large scale pieces. It wasn't quite exactly what I wanted because of the base, but they did another project for me, which actually it comes up later. This is another example of a series of work that I started and approached a fabricator, came back with a massive production cost, and I thought, there is no way I can produce this work. And of course, I know that they have a massive overhead, they have a team that they've got to pay, and they've got the bills just like me. And I thought, how do I produce this work? Because I don't have the team to produce this. My team isn't quite big enough, and also the studio wasn't big enough either. But we figured out a way. I've then managed to, I've been thinking about a way to also support younger artists, and I managed to then find a way where I was able to kind of outsource part of the work to a younger artist who, gave me a quote which was much, much lower, but, I was able to kind of give him that opportunity to kind of produce a piece of work for me. Which, I think helped him kind of set up his studio. So these are kind of plaster floats. I'm just going to flick through because I'm aware I've got, I think, 2 minutes left. And this is a series of work that I started in 2006. I didn't have the money or the, kind of support to produce this series of work, and I waited till I had a project that allowed me to kind of invest, I guess, into the work. So part of these pieces are made in kind of by a fabricator, and part of it was made by the team in the studio. And so there's a kind of massive collaboration going on there. This is a body of work that I've made while I was doing my residency in the Philippines. I was given the doors were kind of open to all the workshops out there, and a small team, and I just absolutely went crazy and made quite a lot of work out there. And it meant that I had to work with each workshop. And what was great about this residency was that at the end of it, everyone in those workshops wanted to be artists, and they didn't realize that the materials that they were working with, how beautiful they are, and how it could be turned into something else. So these are some of the examples. This is a project where I've had to outsource, again, kind of these baskets. So I used to actually weave baskets in Bangladesh as a child with my nanny. And I remember, that being quite amazing kind of process. So unfortunately, on these kind of projects, I've produced this 3 times now. I haven't met the team. I've had kind of photos sent, kind of back and forth, trying to achieve, again, something that I wanted. And it was really, really difficult. And what it, so the way it turned out at the end was that there was quite a lot of wastage, which is again something I really, really struggle with. I don't like wasting, and especially now, everyone being aware of what's happening, with climate change and stuff. You're really conscious of kind of the materials you're using and the things you're putting out in the world. So there was a bit of wastage on this, but it was natural material and we were able to kind of produce these pieces. But there are other projects that I've kind of collaborated. This was a project I've collaborated with a musician, and this was for free, so you can see the difference between the abrage and the piece here in the UK. And this is a collaboration with an architect, Marina Tabassum, which was shown at the Whitechapel Gallery and now is touring to Concrete in Dubai. So they had made this kind of surface for me then to go in and spray. And it was great. I love working with white wall. I feel like, now they know exactly the kind of things that I want and the kind of materials I like to work with and the kind of things that I kind of look out for. So these are some of the photos. I think I'm going to stop here because I don't want to overrun.
You sure?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.